Billionaires and corporations have way too much influence over our government. Currently, we have a new deadline for Trump's tax bill. They want to sign it into law by July 4th. Now, this bill has some good things in it, it has some bad things in it. We don't pick sides politically on this channel. We just give you the facts and let you decide for yourself. But Bernie Sanders has issued a critical warning that this bill is heavily influenced by billionaires and corporations, along with almost every bill that Democrats and Republicans passed. He's calling out both parties, not just Republicans. He's calling out Democrats as well. He's saying that this bill and basically every other bill they've passed in recent history is serving the rich and not helping the average person, and especially not helping those who worked their entire lives and are on Social Security benefits. And Bernie Sanders is issuing a critical warning that this bill, if approved, could move us towards even more billionaire control over our government and over our spending, and limit the chances for an increase in Social Security benefits down the road because it will create an even larger deficit, which then makes it harder to justify the spending on Social Security. And in this video, I'm going to show you the facts, where the spending cuts are going, where the tax cuts are going, and how a lot of this money is being funneled towards the rich instead of people on Social Security benefits that have worked their entire lives. And I think our government should work for the average person and not for billionaires and corporations. So at a time where Bernie Sanders has been fighting to increase Social Security benefits, we've talked about the various proposals, the $2,400 per year increase, the emergency COLA increases, the COLA adjustment to make sure that COLA is larger every single year, basically making sure that anyone in this country that works their entire lives does not have to live in poverty, for God's sakes. Well, now we have a bill that in large part is being controlled by billionaires. And before we jump into the details of that, I quickly want to show you guys a clip from Bernie Sanders explaining how our government, our democracy, has become so controlled by billionaires, so controlled by corporations, that it's becoming completely dysfunctional. And folks, we need to get educated on this. Share these videos with your friends. Share these videos with your family. We have to get out and vote, and we have to keep our politicians honest. But let's take a look. Bernie's going to explain kind of how we got here in the first place, why billionaires are in control of the government, what laws and what judgments were done by the Supreme Court, specifically Citizens United, how that got us here. Then we'll talk about what's in this bill and how it could, potentially create a larger deficit by providing most of those benefits to the rich, making it even harder for Social Security increases to get down the road. I mean, think about it, guys. They're already saying the deficit's too large. We can't afford Social Security benefits. We have to cut Social Security benefits. We have to increase the retirement age, essentially cutting people's benefits. We can't afford Social Security, right? It's a Ponzi scheme. But then they're approving cuts for corporations, millionaires, and billionaires, the top 0.1%, the top 1%, right? Those cuts are making the deficit even larger on this side. But then they're saying we can't afford to help people that have worked their whole lives on this side. And as the deficit gets even larger, they then just have even more of an excuse to say, well, we can't increase benefits because now the deficit's even larger. But the deficit's getting larger because they're cutting taxes on the rich, on corporations, on millionaires and billionaires. But let's take a quick look and see what Bernie Sanders said.
We need to be educating people about the reality of American politics, the degree to which we today have a government of the billionaire class, by the billionaire class, for the billionaire class, the degree to which we are moving toward an authoritarian society, which I don't care if you're a progressive as we are or a conservative Republican, people do not want to see the Constitution of the United States undermined as Trump is doing it every single day. As part of that effort to build a strong progressive movement, what we understand is it is not good enough just to tell the world what a bad job Trump is, the kleptocratic nature of his administration, the idea that this guy's going to take a $300 or $400 million plane from Qatari that he's printing up coins that his family makes money of. I mean, really crazy stuff. We got to do that, but that is not good enough. I think where the American people are hungering and what the Democratic establishment has not provided is an alternative. So why is it that 60% of the American people live paycheck to paycheck? Why is it that billionaires are able to buy elections? And it's not just Elon Musk spending $270 million to get Trump elected. You know, it's Democratic billionaires pouring huge amounts of money into the Democratic Party, making it hard for Democrats, for example.
I think it's great he's calling out both sides. Again, on this channel, I'm not trying to pick sides politically. I'm not trying to tell you who to vote for. I'm just trying to show you the facts and show you that both sides, to a large extent, are controlled by billionaires, and it's hurting our democracy.
To speak out about the horrific Netanyahu war against the people of Gaza. Hard for Democrats to speak out about the need for a Medicare for all single-payer program, about the need to raise the minimum wage to a living wage, about the need to move aggressively in terms of climate change. There is a reason why Democrats are not actively speaking about those issues. And in my view, it has a lot to do with money in politics, which means to me that the most important thing we've got to do is overturn this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision and move to public funding of elections.
Okay, so in this next video, Bernie's going to talk a little bit more about that Citizens United decision by the Supreme Court, which was about 20 years ago, give or take. And essentially, that was the ruling that allows billionaires and corporations to essentially donate as much as they want to political advertisements, essentially saying it's free speech. But really, their free speech becomes a lot more powerful than your free speech, right? You on Social Security benefits, you've worked your entire life, you have free speech, but you don't have a megaphone with hundreds of millions of dollars to have influence over who gets elected and then what agendas get done and which bills gets passed, right? And essentially what he was saying was, you know, you have so much money from corporations and billionaires controlling these elections, not just presidential elections. We all think about the presidential elections, but we don't think about the representatives, you know, the hundreds of representatives across this country, the dozens of senators, right? If any of them speak up against these bills, they don't get reelected because then all that money funnels to their competitor and they lose, right? This is why this needs to change. The Citizens United thing is a disaster, and it's essentially creating this massive issue with our democracy, and billionaires honestly have way too much influence. But let's take a look and see what Bernie had to say about that.
Can you really quickly just tell the audience exactly what it is? Because I feel like we hear these words like Citizens United, and a lot of people, like, we just...
And super PACs.
Yeah, so we just kind of pretend that we know what it is.
Okay.
But...
we have the First Amendment that says your freedom of speech.
Of course.
Okay. So wealthy individuals, in a case called Citizens United, I don't remember all the details, basically said, look, we had at that point, Citizens United, I think is 15, 20 years, that decision from the Supreme Court decision. So people go into the court and say, look, I have a First Amendment right to tell the people of America how I feel about an issue or a candidate. The Supreme Court says, no, we have campaign finance. There's campaign finance law which limits the amount of money you can spend on a campaign.
So there's already a law in place.
There's a law in place.
Legislation said you cannot do that.
That's what Citizens United did. It said the Supreme Court ruled that billionaires, that advertising is freedom of speech, and you can't limit my speech. So if I want to spend $100 million on TV ads, I have the right to do it. They say, you're right. So the issue is democracy versus billionaires being able to spend unlimited sums of money. Supreme Court went with that. And then the form it took was...
Guys, let me know in the comments. Drop a yes if you think it's wrong that billionaires and corporations can donate as much as they want to influence elections and the policy in this country. Drop a yes if you think that's not okay.
What's called a super PAC. You start an organization, Americans for Freedom, okay? And billionaires can put as much money as they want into that. That organization then runs ads on television. It does political stuff. That's what it's about. What does that mean in real life? This is what it means. Right now, we're dealing with a bill called the Reconciliation Bill. It's a fancy Washington term for a very big bill, which will have a lot of stuff in it. In any case, if a Republican stands up and says, you know what? in the House of Representatives. I don't like this bill because, it's giving tax breaks to very wealthy people, and it's going to cut Medicaid and cut nutrition programs. It's a bad bill. What do you think happens the day after that Republican stands up and says he opposes it?
Those super PACs organize and they primary out those
You got it.
politicians.
Exactly.
Let that sink in, guys. Let that sink in that your vote and your free speech is so far outweighed by billionaires and corporations in this country who are allowed to spend hundreds of millions, right? The latest example being Elon Musk. Half of you voted for Trump. Half of my viewers are Republican and half of them are Democrat. This channel was not built around picking a political side. And even if you're okay with the candidate that Elon was fighting for and putting that money behind, do you really think it's okay for anyone to have that much more influence than you do? Your single vote is worth so much less than his? I particularly don't think it's okay. And if you think that needs to change, please drop a yes. Now, interestingly enough, yes, it has been like that for decades. Interestingly enough, Elon Musk recently has been kind of separating himself a little more from Trump. Some people are speculating it's because Republicans are trying to remove that $7,500 tax credit for buying EVs. Essentially, it ends up being a discount for people that want to buy electric vehicles. Obviously, Musk sells electric vehicles. Not sure if Musk was surprised by the fact that Republicans are doing that after he backed Trump. There has been reports that Elon Musk says he doesn't care. He actually thinks it'll hurt other companies more and will help them. We'll have to wait and see, but at least initially, you'd think Trump would have been doing Musk a favor by not including that in this bill. But at least for now, to his credit, it looks like they are going to kind of try and remove that credit, which again would actually hurt Elon Musk surprisingly after he donated so much to Trump. Now, let's talk about the bill, right? And why Bernie is issuing this, this critical warning of why this is bad for the American people. Whether you vote Republican or Democrat, we have to look at the facts. Again, not here to pick sides. And essentially saying that this deadline of July 4th could be a massive disaster if this gets approved, because these tax cuts for corporations and billionaires could become permanent. And again, on this channel, since I like to show you both sides, let's first take a look and see what Republican media is saying about what's good about this bill. Then we'll take a quick look and see what Democratic media is saying about the bill and how they're criticizing it to help you guys come to your own conclusion. And we'll look at statistics as to where these tax cuts are going. Where's the money being spent? Is it being spent on the average person? Is this going to create a massive deficit, which makes it harder to increase Social Security benefits? Remember, they've been saying they can't increase benefits, right? They can't invest more into Social Security to bolster it and secure it for decades to come because the deficit is so big. Well, this bill is going to make the deficit larger. So on the Republican side, right, what is good about this bill? What is included in this bill that could be a positive for the American people? Now, one thing they're saying is no tax on tips. They've included a rule in the bill where if you're a worker that makes tips, and it would exclude higher income individuals, typically if you're in a job where you make tips, you're more of a working class individual. You're a waiter, you're a server, you're a busser, you're an Uber driver, things like that, right? So that's basically targeted to help a working class individual. That's fantastic. That's actually a really good thing to help the average person. They also are increasing the SALT deduction limit. Now, at this point, most of you know what that is if you pay state taxes, you can then use that as a deduction versus your federal income taxes. They want to increase that to like $30,000. So if you make a lot of money and you live in a Democratic state with high state taxes, that then saves you some money on your federal taxes, right? That honestly is going to help more higher income people, but it will help some people. Help car buyers and seniors. Essentially, I believe they wanted to make interest on car loans deductible, which would help a lot of people. That would, probably stimulate the car economy as well as potentially help Elon Musk by people being able to more afford his cars. And seniors, what's in it for seniors? We've talked about it before. You've probably heard about it at this point. He wants to include an additional $4,000 tax deduction for seniors. But again, that only helps people if you actually pay taxes. So if you're a senior that pays taxes, you already get a $2,000 bonus deduction on your taxes for the standard deduction. This would add an additional $4,000, making it $6,000. But again, if you're lower income and you're not even paying taxes, that's actually not going to help you. But for what it's worth, that would help a lot of seniors, right? It just might not help you if you're lower income. Now, the 2017 tax rates would become permanent. Now, basically, everyone got a small tax break from those 2017 tax cuts, right? The problem is when you have someone that makes 50,000 and you give them a 2% tax break, and you have someone that makes 10 million and you give them a 2% tax break, the rich people are getting most of the tax breaks, right? The same thing with corporations. Taxes were lowered massively. We'll jump into that in just a second. And again, that is what's going to continue to make the deficit larger. Most of the savings going to the billionaires and the corporations, growing that deficit, again, making it harder to justify increasing Social Security benefits. It also says no tax hike on the wealthy. Initially, there were rumors that they were open to the idea of, increasing the upper tax bracket to make sure the ultra rich were paying more, but that was not included, obviously. Now, that was the Republican side, right? That's what they're saying is good about this bill. Now, what is bad about this bill? What's the Democratic side saying? How are they criticizing this bill? And again, laying out the facts, laying out how both sides are spinning it so you guys can come to your own conclusion. So if you look on your screen here, it's showing how the benefits of this bill will be distributed based off of your household income. Now, if you look at the top, it can be a little hard to see, but the bottom 25% as far as income, and then at the very bottom, it's the top 1%, and then the top 0.1% as far as household income. Now, if you look at those yellow bars on that bar graph, the larger it is, the more savings are going to these households in this bill. Now, obviously, the lowest 50% of this country, it's showing that because of the Medicaid cuts and because of the SNAP benefit cuts, most people in the bottom 50% as far as household income are going to see a net zero benefit and potentially a larger financial burden by losing some of these benefits over time. Now, as you start moving up, people start to get more of a tax break to the point where if you go up to the top 0.1%, they're expected to save hundreds of thousands of dollars per year in taxes, where if you drop down to, the lower 75%, they're basically making a little bit of less money, the same, or slightly more. It's maybe a few $100s or a couple of $1,000s for most people. And then at the very top, the 1% and the 0.1%, it's tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars in savings. I mean, it's completely insane. And this chart kind of breaks it down a little simpler. So if you're in the bottom 25% of household income, you're expected to maybe save $70 per year. If you're at the bottom 50%, maybe $900 per year. If you're in the top 1%, you're probably going to be saving $60,000 per year. On top of the Medicaid cuts, the SNAP benefit cuts, all of these things cutting on the lower income scale and then giving tax benefits at the higher income scale, right? Again, whether you're Republican or Democrat, you have to look at the facts. You want your politicians to work for you, not be working for the millionaires and the billionaires, right? Now, one thing I like to point out on this channel are, again, like I've said, what are the Democrats saying about things? What are Republicans saying about things? But something that's almost as important is what are they not saying, right? What are they leaving out of their stories that could potentially, show you that, okay, this actually is bad for you, but you're not being well informed because it's not included. Now, on the Republican side, they are not talking about the fact that the majority of the public actually opposes these Medicaid cuts. And if you take a look, polling shows that 76% of Americans oppose cuts to Medicaid as they consider cutting over $500 billion over the next 10 years. This could risk the health insurance for 36 million Americans enrolled in Medicaid. Okay? Now, what about these corporate taxes, right? Because this is where most of the billionaires make their money. Billionaires own stocks in companies traded on the stock market. If you lower taxes on these companies, these billionaires' stock prices go up and their wealth goes up dramatically, right? Well, in the 2017 tax cuts, they lowered the corporate tax rate from 35% to 21%. Think about that massive 14% decrease. Imagine if the average person's taxes were decreased by 14%, right? That'd be massive, right? That would be such a huge help. Well, that's what they did for corporations. And it's actually estimated that although they cut them down to 21%, the effective tax rate on the top 300 largest companies in this country only have an effective tax rate of 12.8%. What does that mean? That means their tax rate is 21%, but that's the ceiling. Then when they start taking deductions, it drops down to an effective rate of 12.8%. So where do things stand today with this bill, right, guys? What is happening with this bill? It's been approved in the House. Now it sits in the Senate. The Republicans have 53 seats in the Senate, and they only need 50 votes to approve this bill. So essentially, the only thing stopping this bill from coming into effect are a handful of Republicans who are, again, worried about the fact that it's going to increase the deficit. There's a couple of different sticking points. We'll go over it really quickly. Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, is urging Republican senators to make minimal changes to the so-called Big Beautiful Bill in order to get it to the president's desk by the 4th of July. Some Republicans are concerned that the bill as written does not address the deficit, but makes it worse. According to economists, the bill will add between 3.3 and 3.8 trillion to the national debt over the next decade. Now, some Republicans have also raised concerns about the changes to Medicaid. There are a handful of Republicans that are concerned about these cuts to Medicaid. There's actually a handful of Republicans that want these cuts to happen sooner and be more severe. But then again, the main thing slowing it down is the fact that a couple of Republicans are concerned about the fact that it's going to increase the deficit. And again, guys, just let's think about it. We've been seeing Bernie Sanders fighting to increase Social Security benefits, not only to increase payments for those who are on benefits now, but also increase funding to make sure that the trust fund and the Social Security plan stays solvent for decades to come, right? And the biggest excuse has been that we're already running at a massive deficit. Well, this bill is only going to make that deficit even worse. And guys, if you support Bernie Sanders' plan to increase Social Security benefits, drop a yes in the comments. I'd like to see your thoughts in the comments. Again, if you like Bernie's plan to increase Social Security, drop a yes in the comments. But he's issuing an urgent warning that if these bills continue to be passed, again, on the Democratic side and the Republican side, with such massive influence from billionaires and corporations, you're going to continue to see this effect where most of the savings or most of the spending is going towards the wealthy instead of going towards the average person. You know, if they can cut corporate taxes from 35% to 14%, why can't they do something like that for the average person? Why are they only doing it for corporations? Why is that making the deficit larger? And then they're saying they can't increase Social Security benefits. They can't fix the problem, so it's solvent long term. This is the critical warning Bernie Sanders is urging. If you guys think this is a serious issue, again, drop a yes in the comments. Let me know your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe. Guys, if you joined today's video, thank you so much for supporting our community. Again, I believe our government should work for the average person, not for billionaires and corporations. Let me know your thoughts on that in the comments, and I'll see you on the next video.